our second to last webinar of the year, which has gone super fast. And today we're going to be talking about how you can scale customer support through peak season success. And we've got insights from One Pilot and the Bottle Club as well. For those that don't know about DTC Live, we are a community for brands, and we're all based on these three pillars of inspiration, education, and connection. So the more value that we can bring to the brands in our community, the better. Here's some of the brands that kind of sit within there. And there's different kind of ways to get involved in DTC Live. So we have our flagship conferences across London, Manchester, New York. We have exclusive invite-only webinars, dinners, drinks, partner events, retreats, both online and offline. And then we also have our newsletter. And soon to be in 2025, we've got our community platform launching as well. And just some stats of some of the brands that we work with. I also run Rainy City, which is a web design and development agency. And we help brands with website redesigns, platform migrations, CRO, and Meta as well. So I'd love to kind of kick things off and get started. And really happy to have you both join us, Tim and George. So if you could just give us a bit of an intro on who you both are, where you work, and what you do.
Go on, Tim.
So thanks, George. I'm Tim. I run the Bottle Club, which is a multi-brand alcohol e-commerce business. We sell 7,500 products across 1,000 brands in 500 categories. So very much focused on multi-brand and growth. My role is running this whole operation as part of the group, but focused a lot on operations. So yeah, George.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm George, so expansion manager at One Pilot. So in short, we're an outsourcer for customer care, but we built this next gen approach for nearly 300 brands. The goal, quite simple, to offer something really flexible and really scalable when it comes to customer service. We'll go into it, some examples, but we outsource for brands like the Bottle Club, Dashwater, Moju, and I'm sure Tim will go into how we work with them during this busy period that's coming.
And Tim, you just gave us a bit of an insight into how busy things are about to get for you guys, or you're already in like the thick of it now anyway, aren't you?
Yeah, 50% of all of our sales is in the last 10 weeks of the year. So we're very much in the thick of it, very much in the trenches as a team. But this is when people buy booze for their friends, basically.
Yeah. And we'll get kind of going with you, Tim. So obviously you guys are experiencing substantial growth. What kind of mistakes do you think that brands typically make when they're like scaling customer support, and how have you guys like managed to like navigate those challenges?
I think for us, it's always been not knowing our processes. So I think when you're managing your own customer service, it becomes a very emotional, very kind of, how would I deal with it, because you're really in the thick of it. And when we have had exponential growth as a business, and then obviously trying to gear up for peak periods and things, that's why we started working with One Pilot. And as we did that process and we built the knowledge base with George, it really made us kind of reflect on how we would address certain issues and reoccurring issues. And again, depending on the person that you spoke to and the customer spoke to, and the reason for an issue, made a different answer, and you again had an emotional response to the answer. So working out, what is your process? How do we do things? Why do we do things? And then if they come up, and in what capacity they come up, how do we deal with it? I think that's how you scale it, because doing everything on a one-by-one basis just isn't sustainable. And it's just, that's where you need a big team, but you don't need a big team if you're being efficient in your answers. Yeah,
and I suppose like you said as well, like 50% of that busyness is across 10 weeks, and what you meant to do for like the rest of what you meant to fill everyone else's time with.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't really have a team of like 20 customer service full time when you've got half that volume during the rest of the year. And it's just looking at a business from a P&L perspective, it's not sustainable. And not being kind of prepared for fluctuations. But as I said, we now have a lot better understanding of how we deal with issues, because of having to kind of, okay, so when this happens, what do we do about it? And work, and then also kind of leaning on One Pilot's expertise on how do other people deal with it. We aren't the first person to deal with this issue. So yeah,
I suppose you get like a lot of the same kind of queries that are kind of coming through, and then I suppose over time, like the amount of like new and unique challenges that are coming up around customer service get lower and lower, don't they?
They do, but I think you still have to be agile because there will be things that you haven't encountered, and businesses change. Like DPD historically have been one of the best delivery outlets, and at the moment they're one of the worst. And you see some of the kind of Trustpilot scores they get at the moment against DPD, and you're like, what is going on? And having to adapt to those issues, and how do we keep the customer happy during those periods? You have to be agile. But yeah.
And George, like, how do you think like customer support's evolved in like recent years, and what do you think's like been like the biggest game changer around that?
So AI, obviously, and it links actually back to Tim's question, I think. So a lot of brands that don't have like well documented processes, or let's say internal knowledge bases, the brands that are going to win and lose at AI are going to be the ones that have the best internal documentation. Like if you go and speak to Gorgeous, Intercom, Zendesk, whatever tool, from like a help desk point of view, the reason why AI isn't doing as good as it should, or why maybe it's doing so well, is because of the internal knowledge base and process. Essentially, AI is only as good as the processes that you've got well documented. So that's easily the best game changer. But I think to counter that, a lot of brands are trying to run before they can walk with it, and as a result, having some quite questionable interactions between an AI, which is obviously not a person, that don't go a certain route. Versus allowing it to focus on the most simple processes that you have, well documented. But I think AI is the obvious game changer that's helping not just brands automate tickets, but really enabling the agents to be more efficient. I think that's where AI is going, right? It's like the enabler, not necessarily the replacement. At least today. Obviously, that will naturally change, I expect.
Yeah. But I mean, it's the same with like so many other ways that you use AI, isn't it? I think people expect sometimes that it's, you just put in like a quick question or a quick statement, and it's going to spit out like the most thought out response. But there's still like, you've still got to work into it more and not just be totally reliant on it, haven't you, to get the most out of it?
Yeah, and I think it's also that element of AI might be able to do X percentage of tickets, but doesn't mean it should. Like there are certain interactions and scenarios where a consumer, customer, user of your product really values interacting with a human, and there's a time and a place where they just don't need to, which is great. There's a time and a place where being, an issue being resolved by an actual person does make the world a difference. But yeah, obviously huge impact on wider things.
I think as well, like when I get asked about AI, one of the things I always add is what AI lacks is context, and like especially with the product range that we've got, we need to stay the expert. So we still need to give smart recommendations. So if you say, I like Jameson's, what else should I drink? You can't go Jack Daniels because they're not the same. In theory, the AI is going to go, they're both whiskies and they both sell well, so they must be similar. But without that context and that kind of extra knowledge, you're going to give the wrong answer. And that's just going to ruin your reputation rather than increase it.
I suppose this one's really for both of you. Like, how have you seen customer expectations change, like particularly around peak? And I suppose in response to like the AI and the automated responses, and then the more personal responses that are required. And yeah, do you think brands are managing to adapt to the new way of handling this?
I think for me, as much as AI, I think one of the other things that to your last question as well is the amount of kind of quick response channels that people expect now. So like we've always just been an email only business. We didn't really do phone lines because we didn't have the capacity. And then obviously moving with One Pilot, we were able to turn on a better response for live chat and phone and Facebook Messenger, Instagram, because with businesses such as Amazon and other e-commerce businesses they're used to dealing with, they're expecting an instant response, and AI helps that as well. But I think that's where a lot of customer expectation comes from now is, I want an answer. And the more especially during this period, I think consumers have got a little bit more patient with e-commerce businesses, which I love. They're like, I appreciate things are busy, and I appreciate that I might not get this within the 3 to 5 days that you said it was going to be. They get that, but what they do expect is to be communicated with. And I think as long as you're on top of that communication and they feel listened to and valued, that's really what matters in CS. Not so much about achieving that it will be there by the 5th in like 5 days.
Yeah, and I think that's nail on the head, right? It's like consumers are naturally getting a little bit more patient, but the end goal is resolution. Like if you respond, to play devil's advocate, if you respond really quickly, that's great. But you're taking 5 days to resolve an issue, that's obviously a problem. If you take, I don't know, 4 hours, which isn't amazing, but let's just say you do take 4 hours, but you can resolve that in 1 day, the actual end sentiment from the users can be much better than getting like a 10-minute first response time, but taking 5 days. So there is that balance and trade-off. But I think that they're ultimately what customers care about: how quickly they're responding, and are they actually responding? Like when we onboard a customer, and this happens all the time, where their first response time may be really healthy, but the number of interactions per ticket is really high, naturally meaning that the end resolution is dictated on how quickly the customer is responding. And that's just not a negative experience if it's taking like nearly a week to resolve an issue. So I think it may sound really simple, but obsessing over those two things: how quickly do you respond, and how the quality of that interaction, i.e. are we resolving? You know, if you obsess over these two metrics, it's very hard to lose at CS.
If you look at Trustpilot on nearly any e-commerce businesses reviews, most of the 1-star reviews are always around customer service. That some are around about delivery and whatever else, but most times, they were too slow, it took ages, they didn't answer my question. It's not, it was late, or DPD smashed it, or something like that. They're just annoyed that they weren't listened to. And I think that's the bit you have to nail, is nurture that customer and like make them feel loved and respected, and the rest of it's relatively easy.
Yeah. Do you think that it's harder to appease customers now? Do you think that they require a much like higher level of attention than before? And do you think there's any kind of cause around why that might have changed?
I would say yes, on a very minor level. I think Amazon's the fuel of this, right? Like one-click purchase, next day delivery, customer service. You can get responses in sub 30 seconds nearly all the time. So that obviously fuels that really high expectation. But I still think there's that sentiment from consumers that like, this isn't Amazon. Like and you can be a little bit more patient, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the customer as well, to be honest. Like I've worked in retail for years before I got into e-commerce, and it depends on the people that you're around. Sorry about that. It depends on the people that you're interacting with, right? So it's not ideal. It depends on the customers and how they're going to deal with it. So we get fraudulent customers a lot of the time, trying to get away with things and trying to get discounts that they don't need or shouldn't have. But the majority of customers, are relatively easy to appease.
I'm just waiting for my dog to start as well, because I just know as soon as the doorbell rings, that's the first thing that she'll start doing as well. It's like I'm just waiting to put my finger on the mute button. And what's like your go-to strategy then, Tim, for prepping your like support team around these periods? Is there any kind of key things that you go over ahead of time, or?
Sorry. I think it's just about, we tried to simplify everything, especially during this period of time. It's how do we simplify peak? Because before we started doing like, let's do all the value added purchases, let's start adding the glassware on, let's start making additional products, let's add discount codes for different group sets, and it just becomes complicated and just adds to the workload and the time to response time, as George said. So just kind of stepping back and saying, how can we offer the best, BFCM period, offer the best Christmas period for these people, for these customers, without putting too much strain on the business. And I think we've run this business for 6 years, and we've made plenty of mistakes and learnings. And the one year that we went really heavy on Black Friday, and we were so excited about how many customers we were getting and how much sales were coming in, and we just glossed over the fact that actually we're going to have to pack these orders in the morning. And we've got a capacity in our warehouse, and we're like, okay, now we've got to get 10,000 orders out tomorrow, and we've got a capacity of doing 1,000. How are we going to do this? So simplifying and working out how can we still offer value to the customer without putting too much strain and too much complexity to the questions that they've got.
Yeah.
And I think it's like transparency as well, isn't it? Like when you're a business that I guess hasn't had those peak Black Fridays, and you're still growing and figuring out that Q4 period, if you know that fulfilling is going to be 2 or 3 days delayed, just make that super, super clear, just to avoid those obvious customer tickets of people coming back and being like, hey, you advertise next day delivery, but it's been like 4 or 5 days. If you know they're going to be delayed, just educate that in the buying process, and it shouldn't really have that much of a negative impact on conversion as you would think. And also just, avoids the unnecessary negative interaction between one of the agents and one of the customers, basically. So I think that's the other thing, just being super transparent. If you're going to be delayed, or if you're unsure if there are delays, proactively reaching out. I think it's the other thing brands sometimes miss, especially when it's their first let's say, bigger Black Friday when they're still in that like hyper growth phase.
And I think also just being prepared to extend your delivery period. Like, people could think that's going to miss conversion, but actually it's far better to say it's going to take 7 days than say it's going to be 3 and then it not be there. Then they have to do a refund. Then there's 5 customer service tickets. It's like, if they really want that product, they're going to buy it. So don't cling too much onto that.
Saves a few refunds as well, right? So
and the actual business cost of actually dealing with those like incorrect periods is far worse than missing one of the sales by someone that's being impatient. But they still they might not be able to buy it from anywhere else, especially if you're a brand. If they want it, they'll get it. So don't over promise and under deliver. It's better to under promise and over deliver, right?
Definitely. And George, what do you think makes like a really good, memorable customer experience?
So I think if you're a new consumer, I think there's 2 ways to look at this. I think if you're a new consumer, you value like things we've talked about already, like transparency, how quick is that response, and then are they resolving, through that process. I think if you're thinking from let's say you're a VIP customer, or if you're talking like a true like memorable CX experience, my go-to is fuel. So I used to buy fuel all the time when I was at uni, and I bought way too much. And I remember them proactively reaching out, being like, look, it's pretty obvious that the next order you're going to receive is going to be more than you probably consumed in the last month. Do you want us to hold it back a month? And for me, that's like next level customer experience.
Oh, yeah.
Like they've so, and that may sound really obvious, but most brands don't think to do things like that. So when you're talking about memorable experience, if you're like a new consumer, just obsess over FRT resolution. But if you're talking about someone who's a repeat or high lifetime value customer, use that whole surprise and delight to your advantage. Like, go that extra mile, like refund when necessary, replace at all costs. And again, I think that goes down to segmenting your customers the right way. But from like a memorable point of view, it's just putting things right, whether it's short, or long term type thing.
And what do you think that the metrics should be that like brands should be looking at for those new customer response rates and like the resolution time?
So if it's pre-sale, and I know every business is a little bit different, you need to be trying to respond in real time. Like if I'm going online and it's a type of product where like, how's the fitting? Maybe it's not that clear on the product page, and ideally I'd like to speak to someone before purchasing. So maybe it's quite an expensive product. Those kind of brands should be trying to offer that real life, conversational marketing piece, like live time or live shopping type experience with an agent. But for, I guess, a business not of that type of size, typically, average response for a brand is 12 hours. If you can get it down under 4, that's awesome. But again, I think the end goal was like resolution, like same day, one touch, that they're the 2 metrics you want to go for. Varies from brand to brand, but the average like resolution, like one touch, is anywhere from like 40 to 80%. So if you're on the high percentage of that, and maybe one other metric a brand should always look at is the contact ratio from orders to tickets created on new customers. And if you're above 15%, that's typically where you're in the danger zone. Basically, like more than 15% of new customers that are raising tickets, there are underlying issues as to why they're reaching out and can't find the answers themselves, or maybe fulfillment or product related problems that are fueling those tickets.
Got it. And what advice would you give brands that are looking to like outsource that support, but they're concerned about like the quality issues?
So me and Tim might have similar answers, but I'm sure Tim will have his view as well. I think from my point of view, if you're going to outsource anything, go and talk to customers of the outsourcer, like P1. Like if let's say we lose out on a new brand and they've gone maybe with an alternative, which can happen. I mean, I would always say like, hey, go and speak to those customers, go speak to those agents as well, and get a gauge for quality. Our kind of model is quite different to a normal outsource agency in the sense that agents have a third of their pay attributed to quality. Basically means every single time one of our agents is responding on behalf of the Bottle Club, they're not just hitting copy and paste and send, they are going that extra mile. The reason we do that is because if you are just getting paid a fixed hourly amount to do customer service, you don't really care. Naturally, you're going to care less because your quality, the quality of the interaction between agent and customer isn't really weighted. And we know the impact quality has when earnings are involved. So that would kind of be my advice. But Tim can kind of give his view, because I know, like, correct if I'm wrong, this was like the first time the business had outsourced when we initially started. Yeah, for sure. I think any business can turn on a call center and just say, go and you deal with it, go and sort it. But I think what set One Pilot apart in general, and this whole process for us, was what I mentioned earlier about
actually sitting down and going, okay, what happens in this scenario, and building a knowledge base that you can kind of refer back to. And One Pilot's amazing, but there are certain queries where One Pilot are not going to have the answer because they're not close enough to the buying team or to the stakeholders to give the correct answer, which is why the process of escalation works really well. But I think even the team that we have that support and deal with those escalations still refer back to what's in the knowledge base, because of the fact that we have one fixed area that has the answers to a lot of the scenarios that we've dealt with previously. And as I say, staying agile with different problems as they arise, just adding new knowledge bases for, okay, if this ever happens again, at least we know what we would do about it. And I think I can appreciate the reluctance to outsource it, but when you come at outsourcing with building a process and building a knowledge base with it, it makes it a lot more easier to kind of handle.
Yeah. And do you know what I think sometimes what brands miss, like going back to the original point around building a knowledge base and having all those processes, if you have that, you can actually do some internal outsourcing. Like if there are periods in a year where you've got, I don't know, interns joining the business, or maybe you've got, people in other teams that are a little bit disconnected to CS or CX. If you've got something well documented down to a T on all your processes, obviously you're not going to be able to handle the most complex tickets. You can get other members jumping in and bridging that gap between teams and just getting a feel of what's going on the front line. And when you do get really busy, although obviously Tim can depend on us, there are some brands out there that maybe don't outsource, that if they did have an internal knowledge base, they could like, hey, Jeff in finance, you want to jump on customer service for an hour during Black Friday, which could make the world a difference. Yeah. So just by having that by default, you can actually stretch the internal team a little bit more as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think to answer your question as well, is that the scalability side of it, like why would you outsource, is because, with a business like ours, for example, it is impossible. It's near impossible to be able to build up a team quickly, deal with something, and then kind of get rid of them straight afterwards. So actually just having an outsource there where you're not responsible for the staff members' time, you're only paying for what you're actually using, just gives you that little bit more like peace of mind.
Mm. And what's the support timeline that you offer? Not timeline, but what's like the open times of your customer support team at the minute, Tim?
So that was something that really was a big win for moving to One Pilot. I think me and Georgia spoke of this at length, and we kind of have a bit of a catchphrase off the back of it now. But businesses shouldn't dictate when their customers speak to them. I think we're wrong about that a lot of the time. I think one of the main things about e-commerce in general is it's about convenience. Like if you really wanted to go for a little shopping trip down the street and buy some clothes and go to your local shop, that's a different experience to actually buying clothes online or buying anything online. It's all about convenience. So, but all of us work. Everyone that's spending money online has to work to have to do it in the first place, right? So they're going to be working most likely 9 till 6, and so forcing them into having to interact with the business within those hours isn't correct. Like our order peak times are 1 p.m. and then 6 to 9 p.m. So that's when the majority of people are on our site and wanting to interact with us as a business. So how do we enable them? So we have our internal team deals with a lot of tickets during their working hours, so they can deal with custom orders and any issues and speak to DPD if there's any claims and things. But then in terms of overall customer service at One Pilot, we've been able to do customer service over the weekend. So all of Saturday and Sunday covered, all the late night hours. So our customer service now operates from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day, Monday to Sunday. Yeah. So because we shouldn't be dictating when they can call us or speak to us.
And I bet there really wouldn't be any way that you could facilitate that all year round if you didn't use something like One Pilot.
No, not at all, because you would have to have a full-time member of staff for the day to hope there was going to be tickets. But then just because what the customer service is on doesn't mean it's in use. So there might be no tickets that come in on a Sunday and there's somebody just sat waiting there and you're trying to find work for them to do and they haven't got the right responsibilities to be doing anything that is of value. So actually just having One Pilot there on kind of the back burner ready to go when needed is really useful.
And when you made that change, did you notice like an uptick in like metrics around customer service, obviously with the amount of people that were getting responded to, but did you find that the customers in general were a lot more happier when they were ordering?
Yeah, 100%. And we see that within our customer service scores, like our Trustpilot scores have increased, and same with Google as well. There is obviously still 1 stars, but if you go into the detail of those, it's either around fraud or damages by the couriers. Like, why do you use this courier? But we sell dangerous goods, right? So there's not actually that many people that were prepared to send stuff. So we're a bit screwed in that respect. But yeah, the overall number of 5 stars and the amount of customer service reviews that say the customer service is amazing, they were really helpful, did change. And previously it was just like, they never answer us, they never answer the phone doesn't work.
Yeah,
well, that isn't one of the issues that we have. Another thing that me and George talk a lot about is, a lot of the time we're all chasing cheaper and cheaper CPCs and trying CPA, right? One of the easiest ways of getting more customers is making the customers that you've already got have a good experience and tell you about. We ask at the end of all of our orders, where did you hear from us? And as you go through that, it's like, oh, my friend told me about you, and my friend told me about you, because is it 60% of all of our sales comes from Google Shopping, right? It's people that know the product that they want, but only 20% of people buy alcohol online versus 70% of people buy clothes online. So trying to keep them, trying to find new customers to think about buying alcohol online, one of the easiest ways is from existing customers.
And I suppose like this kind of flows nicely into the next bit around like ensuring brand values are reflected, and the tone of voice as well of a brand, because I imagine that really does differ from brand to brand, the way that you respond to your customers, the way that you speak to them. How can brands make sure their support teams have that reflected in the response, even when it is outsourced?
So from my point of view, it goes back to that quality bonus. If you're going to outsource support and that an agent is getting a fixed amount, where is the incentive to go the extra mile and mirror that brand tone of voice? That said, and then we spoke about this actually at the DTC Live, and Holly from Dashback, this was a really good point, that there's a time and a place to really drum up brand tone of voice. When a customer reaches out really pissed off about a particular issue, sometimes having a lot of brand emojis and having your brand catchphrase isn't actually what they want to hear. They just want a quick response and a resolution to their problem. But ultimately, it's just obviously it's training, it's incentivizing the right behavior, and that's obviously part of our model. So how we deliver on brand tone of voice. And then just finally, we batch agents. So for example, we'll have brands like, well, in let's say women's health, where it doesn't make sense for a 21 or 22-year-old guy to be one of the main frontline agents. Again, like demographic of the end users, timings of when they reach out, channels of choice, these all tend to spit out what type of agent should be on the kind of front line. So it's also just getting the right people who want to do customer service for those right brands. Typical contact center isn't really that model. You just work on the brands that you're given, which then have a negative impact on attrition. So I think it's a combination of those kind of 3 things.
I think just to add, just again, to refer back to just knowing your knowledge base and knowing your processes, I think brand tone of voice is, as George says, has a time and a place, but having a consistent answer to the same problem is what matters. And you don't want to see, customer service reviews saying, oh, well, if I asked, when I spoke to Tim, he said I could have this, but when I spoke to Alex, he said that, and that's just not good for your brand image. You need to have all be on the same page with the same answer to the same problem.
And I know we've kind of previously touched on like how much it does impact like retention and growth. Do you have any kind of metrics on that, Tim, from?
Not to hand, to be honest. I think we see the referral side of things and we see the positive reviews, but in terms of actually attributing that to customer service, not specifically. I don't know if George, you've got a bit more insight in that.
Not specific metrics. One I think Gorgeous does really well. If you've got a pro seat, it reports on it a lot of the tools will tell you how much revenue has been driven. Like pretty much any help desk should have that. If not, because they're getting a better help desk. But what Gorgeous does quite well, it does on an individual level. So what we can do at the end of each week and month is, right, okay, what percentage of pre-sale tickets has X agent been handling? And what percentage of those has converted? How much revenue have they driven? So we can actually see which agents are better at handling pre-sale conversations, and what type of conversations tend to end up with a conversion. But it makes a difference. If you're getting pre-sale questions, it's like what Tim said, go down to a local store, you might have questions in person. For a high AOV item, sometimes that is what's needed online. So just being able to get like an expert agent in real time, answer those product-based questions to then move you along in that buying process can make a big difference.
I mean, we don't do it because we've just got so many products and so much knowledge you would need. But I think in certain businesses as well, if you can, schedule some pop-ups to come up if you've got a repeat customer coming to the same product page saying, have you got any questions about this? If you need to know anything, let us know. I think that's a super powerful thing that we kind of miss from kind of brick and mortar retailing. Actually having someone to go, oh, do you need any help? Do you have any questions about the item? Yeah. Is really important.
Yeah, so we have obviously you've heard of Decathlon, obviously, so they're one of our quite large, let's say, sport multi-brand customers. And what we'll try and do, and it's not always possible, based on like the routing of the help desk, we'll have different agents based on their like sport of preference. So someone reaches out about maybe like a kayak or a particular product. It just means that, again, this is not always possible, obviously, but where possible, we'll do it. But agents can actually go back and be like, oh, like where are you going out running this week? So you bought a pair of trainers. So it's not that kind of macro response. They can actually relate it back to themselves, which I guess going full circle is kind of spelling out why human support is still a little bit needed in certain situations.
And what about like mistakes that you typically see being made? Like we spoke quite a lot about like the improvements, but what about what happens when brands are trying to scale, and is there any kind of common mistakes that people listening could avoid?
So I say, as of today, the biggest mistake people are making with AI, because obviously that's on everyone's mind, like every CX manager, they're going to be reporting in how they're using AI to reduce costs, make their agents more efficient, and so on. The biggest one is they're trying to run before they can walk. And what I mean by that is they're trying to automate and resolve tickets without the foundations there, i.e. a very well-structured knowledge base and robust processes. Because without that, AI is not in a place where you can just turn it on and it have that pre-context on your processes. Like every business is going to have a different tech stack, different nuances in the back end, and until you have a well-documented A to Z on how to resolve all of those issues, AI within any tool isn't going to be as effective as it could be. So I think a lot of brands are expecting it to be like this good, but they haven't actually got the basics well documented. So I'd say that's probably the biggest mistake a lot of brands are making.
I don't have an answer so much on mistakes, but I think one thing that I've really liked knowing since having One Pilot is the usage of the knowledge, like which articles within the knowledge base they're using and how often. And it starts to make the merchant understand some of the issues they need to resolve. So like it was like 40% of all of our One Pilot tickets were about follow up on my order. I said, well, what are they asking about? Why do I keep having to spend money on answering the same problem? What could I be doing more as a merchant to enable that customer to be satisfied? Do I set up a more accurate macro? Do I give better tracking information? Which then prompted us to move WMS systems to SendCloud, because then SendCloud will send all of the updates on the tracking as they happen in real time. So which then greatly reduces the number of questions of where is my order, because they've already been told where their order is. It doesn't need a customer service ticket. It doesn't need a One Pilot agent to respond to that. And then you can start obviously using Gorgeous to create additional rules that if the order is unfulfilled and there hasn't been any tracking information, then actually where is it? Put an internal note within Gorgeous to go work out with the warehouse to go, okay, this order is behind now. I need to let the customer know proactively that it's late before they start chasing. And I think that's what adds to really good customer service, is like being proactive. If you know there's a problem, letting them know rather than waiting for them to go, hold on a minute, where is it?
Yeah, it's like doing the thinking for your customers, isn't it? I suppose, like how you said about that Huel example, like you're doing forward planning and forward thinking so that they don't have to worry about it. And that's, I think, what sets brands apart from the customer service level, isn't it? It's like when they can do all that for them.
Yeah, and it comes back to that convenience thing, right? The whole point of e-commerce is convenience. So if we're making things difficult, we're putting them out to do something. So I mean, that's why subscription businesses work so well, because you don't have to go and purchase it every time; it's already coming. And just how do you make life more efficient and more convenient for the customers that you've gained?
And what's like if you could only give one piece of advice to D2C brands that are considering outsourcing, like customer service support, over like BFCM or over Christmas or whenever their peak is, what would it be?
Is that me or George? I think for me, my answer would be think about when your customers want to talk to you. I think that's the biggest one for us, was you're cramming in late customer service by forcing them that you're only going to respond during these hours. Open up that period of time, open up the scalability of it. And then the second one, which I think I've harped on about, is just know your process. If you don't know your process, is when you're going to is where the mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah. And I think from my side, it's like not every brand needs to outsource. So just test like the appetite and how much you need to. So typically when a brand needs to outsource, it's like faster response times, offering more channels, maybe new languages. And sometimes it can be quite easy to test that. So, you know, me and Tim always bang on about like dictating when customers can reach out. It's a really negative experience. Just test opening a few hours a week. It shouldn't be that difficult to get one of your internal members, like offer them a Domino's voucher, whatever it takes, or an incentive. Do an extra few hours, a few evenings a week, and see the impact that it has on conversion and repeat business. And you should be able to track all of that inside your help desk. If you see positive results, okay, cool. Then go get an outsourcer. You can do evenings and weekends. Same with like live channels. Just have an agent test internally what impact does it have by turning live chat on and during, let's say, your busiest times on the website, offering that, you know, 20, 30, 40-second response time, and then the impact that has. If it doesn't really make a difference, it maybe suggests that your consumers don't need that extended coverage, or you, as a business, there isn't that much more value to be added. Typically, that's not the case. That would be my advice. My brand needs to. So really work out, do you actually need to even outsource that as a business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, enabling channels is another one as well. I think, yeah, working out based on who your customer is. If you're massively gaining customers on social ads, then surely then your customers are on social, and then they're going to have a negative experience. They're already on there to start putting reviews against your pages and things. So just make sure you're there to answer any queries that they have then and there. I think we've had customers where we've done, say, an Instagram live, or we've put like a really cool video up, and then the customer's like, you won't answer my question on customer service, but you can go to a tasting and it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Whereas as long as you're keeping on top of that communication with the customer, they're not going to be, you know, just having bad taste in the mouth, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And George, how does One Pilot approach like training agents from, like, how does it differ from like traditional methods, I suppose, and like what impact does that have on your guys' quality?
Yeah, so it's more train the trainer. So traditional model is, you know, put them in a classroom or virtually online, and you spend days and weeks training agents. The reason you spend so long is because the outsourcer bills on how long it takes to train an agent. There's instantly a misalignment of interest. The way we do our model, so all agents have 2 years support experience. They already know how to use tools like Gorgeous, Shopify, Zendesk, Intercom, whatever they need to use. So we're not really needing to train them on, you know, back office tools or any of the relative tech stacks. They really typically know how to use it. When we actually come to train them, we've got our own learning management system, and it's quite simple. There'll be like tutorials, videos, assessments. They don't pass the assessment on the brand, they don't shift. So it's really the case of, hey, like, prove that you've studied the brand, you've studied their processes, and show us you're a right fit. If you don't pass, you don't shift. And also, what the key difference here is they choose to sign up, right? We don't say, hey, you have to shift for the Bottle Club. We open it up to select agents, and then we cherry pick the ones that go through the assessment are most suitable, and only ones that have passed that assessment. So we instantly just get a much better ratio of quality, because we're not taking any agent and only, yeah, exactly. We're not just taking anyone, and it's a two-way street. Like our model, there's a lot of benefits to One Pilot, and I'm obviously wearing my sales hat, but the reality is it does not work unless we have high quality agents who want to shift and do a good job. Like if we don't have agents willing to do that, our whole model fails. So getting that balance right of like agents choosing when they work for the right brands with the right interests and so on makes a huge difference. But when it comes to training, so a long answer, but we do it all for our own like virtual learning management system, which isn't at the cost of the customer, most importantly.
And then I suppose if like using the Bottle Club, for example, their peak, if that person's then not needed in the summer, but they are back in the winter, do you try and like reuse the same agents that have already worked with the brand so they know it?
Yeah, I mean, if we can, 100%, but it's customer service. You always get a little bit of attrition. I mean, the average agent is with us for 14 months. For context, in normal customer service, it's sub 6 months in a typical contact center, because it's one of the highest like attrition roles. In terms of reusing the same agents, if they're there by default, that's exactly how it would work. Where our model becomes flexible is that we can mutualize quite easily. So let's say, hypothetically, we needed 3 or 4 agents working on the Bottle Club today, just pulling that number out of thin air. We would actually oversupply and overtrain. So there would always be around, like, let's say 7 or 8. So that means if suddenly backlog started to creep up, response times went the wrong way, we can reassign agents in real time. The benefit of that is we can maintain SLAs whilst delivering quality. The opposite to that effect is the Bottle Club might only need 1 agent, because for whatever reason, the volume on that particular day isn't as high. And then the flexibility goes the other way. We can reassign agents to other projects that are non-competitors. And that just means it's a pay-per-usage model, as opposed to paying for agents that you don't need, which again is the traditional pain point when you outsource, because you say, all right, I think I need 2 agents. You only end up needing 1, just hypothetically. But guess what? You're still paying for 2 people to work, and you actually don't even need them. So that's the other problem when you have like dedicated agents, that they're not always going to be required. You just can't scale up with that buffer.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about like pricing and things as well, because I think it's good like how you guys are so transparent with how you charge.
Yeah, so it's monthly subs. You pay for an account management, which is $3.99, and you pay a price per ticket, which is around £2. Again, depending on how long processes take, it can be more, can be less, and that's pretty much it. Like all of the costs of training, supply, running quality check, that's all accounted for in our costs. Again, people who listen, who have never outsourced, or maybe they have, they'll know the traditional model is very expensive, because the time it takes to find an agent, replace an agent if they churn, train them up, that's all accounted into cost in terms of setup, whereas we don't run that model. We factor that into our model, knowing that we've got very good attrition, very high quality agents that are already there, ready to go. So that's it from a pricing point of view.
Amazing. And I suppose like last question for both of you really, like what are some ways that brands can use feedback from the support interactions to help fuel growth? Like using it as a learning tool, I imagine.
So I'm probably going to be repeating Tim's point, but what we call it like RCA, like root cause analysis. Basically, again, if you're not tracking it, you should be looking at which tickets have the most amount of interactions or the highest like recontact rate, looking at why those things are coming up, and then creating that feedback loop back into your knowledge base. So whether you outsource or not, if you see a process starting to increase more and more, it should be the case of, okay, cool, well, why has that come up? Go into the knowledge base, retrain the internal team, and then the idea is that you're reducing that recontact rate. And that's what typically a lot of brands mistakenly do. They'll wait until the end of Black Friday or their peak periods to fix those processes, or that they'll repeat the same issues the same year, which I always find quite baffling. Like if you're going to not fix it in real time, at least come January, start fixing those processes for the new year, or even for coming peak periods, despite them being a long time away.
I think if you look at businesses that are not like VC backed e-commerce businesses as well, like there are periods of time like right now where cost of acquisition is so high that you can't scale at the same amount that you have done previously. So it sometimes comes back to, okay, let's review the business in an efficiency standpoint. Where can I reduce costs so that I'm maximizing the profit, that because I'm making less profit or less revenue than I was making previously? One of the best ways of doing that is obviously seeing the errors that you're making, reducing the number of refunds, reducing the amount of money that you're spending on customer service, making sure the products that you're selling are profitable. And I think that's where those wins are. It's just being efficiencies a lot of the time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys. That was super insightful and hopefully helped answer everyone's burning questions around like customer service, especially like now it is the busiest time, and I think customer expectations are so high around this time as well. Like there's that panic of making sure things come in time for Christmas. So no, that was brilliant. We've had a few questions that have come through, so I'll just kind of throw these out to both of you really. One of them is, as a brand in like skincare, where obviously expertise is critical, so understanding like skin concerns, product ingredients, how do we ensure like outsourced agents would have the necessary knowledge to be able to support that?
So I think on this one, you have to be incredibly realistic. Like in a short space of time, you're not going to be able to get outsourced agents that could be experts on things like skincare and cosmetics. It will take time. The analogy we'll use in turn is think like a conveyor belt, meaning that like on day one or week one, you start on these simpler processes. Now, once the agent's now them, they move up and they slowly, gradually increase the complexity of those tickets. And then what will happen over time, whether it takes 1 month, whether it takes 6, depending on the complexity of the product questions and product knowledge required, is those agents that have been working on the account the longest, they will automatically receive those most complex product questions. So that's essentially what we would do. So that would be my recommendation, that if you are going to outsource them, don't outsource the most complex product questions on day one, and have like a ramp up plan. If someone's telling you that, hey, like our agents are going to be doing the most complex product questions like your internal team really quickly, like that's a red flag for me anyway.
But I also, George, I'd say like there's a scenario where you could start gathering or asking the correct questions if someone comes in and say like they could be within the knowledge base. Here's the questions to gather, and then
if it's 100%, if it's black and white, like we always say, if it's process based, like customer asks X, agent responds with Y, like well, absolutely can be done quickly. I guess it's more, especially in like cosmetics, there's always that bit of a nuance, where you've got hundreds of SKUs. Okay, this product's run out. What do you recommend? And sometimes there's so many different scenarios that it does take time to build up that knowledge base. So we can do it. There's just that reality of I think especially in skincare, there's a larger variance of new questions that come up, I would say, compared to the average e-commerce brand. So you can do it. It's just about like building up that process, like Tim mentions.
I suppose you might have done something similar with like product recommendations, like you was talking about before, about like, when someone wants to know about a certain whiskey, or like did you guys do anything particular around helping with that side of customer service?
Not so much as customer service. What we spent a lot of time doing is we built a really big taxonomy. So every single product sits in a 4-tiered taxonomy, so that when we do potentially look at AI or building a knowledge for the customer service team, there is at least enough context against the product to be able to infer that, if with the example of they like Jameson's, don't recommend Jack Daniels, well, actually it's got enough context to say, well, actually this is an Irish whiskey and it's blended and it's from this area. Here's other products within this of the same price range. We've built that. Obviously that's not native to Shopify because there isn't that level of depth in terms of data. We built that and then we can kind of report against it. But it's, as I said, trying to nail that and trying to make sure that it's understandable across 500 categories or 1,000 brands is obviously tricky. So we haven't.
Yeah. And maybe just I was just going to add like on that one as well. Typically what will happen with like, let's say the traditional model is an agent will try and be the hero. So make that recommendation, even though they could be giving really terrible advice and affecting the end, like customer satisfaction or whether they actually convert. Just have a really good escalation process. Like there is a time and a place to try and answer the question. And there's a time and place to say, look, I'm not too sure. Let's go back to the internal team, double check what they would suggest. And then next time the knowledge gap's closed. And we would actually incorporate that into their quality bonus. So if an agent escalates back to Tim's team and it's a correct escalation, we see that as a huge positive instead of making a mistake. So that would then impact their bonus versus just trying to be the hero and messing up basically.
Yeah. And this one's quite relevant, I suppose, to like the time that we're in now. Like when a brand is like overwhelmed with tickets during like BFCM or Christmas, what's your advice for like prioritizing responses without making customers feel like ignored? So
from my point of view, it's like, go on, mate.
I think for me, one of the we learned this the hard way. We've been through the ringer with customer service post Black Friday. One of the most useful things, as much as it seems inefficient, is get someone tagging the orders, tagging the tickets. Obviously, with one pilot, you've kind of got the knowledge base anyway, but tag the ticket problems. So someone as they come in, read them, tag them, and then based on what you've tagged them with, prioritize. So if it's cancellation of an order, it's an amendment of an address, that's priority one. Like they need sorting over where is my order, or is this going to come in time, or what does this go well with this product? That they're important, but they're not as important as the ones that need doing within 5 minutes. And the only way that you're going to be able to keep on top of that is actually reading them and categorizing them correctly, and then building out. And then if you do the tags correctly, you can start building views, and then you can have people responsible for views within the platform. So
that's great.
I think we had a very similar answer, but I think just on that again, like, and you basically what Tim's saying is like look at what tickets cost you the most. So, for example, if you know your cutoff or fulfillment cutoff is 9 a.m., if you've got those tickets tagged correctly, and you've got a partner or internal team doing them the night before in the morning, like if a return costs you, let's say 5, 6, 7 quid, I don't know, depending on the business, depending on the size, it's really worth investing in that, saving that return by, allowing them to cancel the order or make that delivery change where necessary, because otherwise you're just creating a cost later down the line. So I would look at which tickets pay to respond the fastest and prioritize that way. And they should be quite easy to quantify based on, cost of return, cost of refund, lifetime value of the customer in terms of avoiding churn, and then the order value of that basket that, obviously would be then prioritized in each of those queues.
And then my other one is set up a macro or a rule just to ensure that you're getting the right answer. Because a lot of the time, like, I have a question, Tim, and then then the customer service has to go and go, what is the question? How can I help you? But that's a waste of a ticket. Whereas if you've got an automated rule saying, okay, if it's damaged, send us a photo. If it's delayed, let us know, and we'll send you the tracking. And you give them a list of things that they need as a rule. The next ticket that you get that's unresponded to is more easy to then respond to, because you've actually given them. We've wasted a lot of customer service time and tickets answering really broad hello messages in live chat. Well, actually, you need to kind of prompt them into working out what the problem is before you start answering the ticket.
And this one is from a pet brand. So our customers often have urgent needs, like they're going to be running out soon. Like, how do we balance urgency with like realistic expectations around like delivery?
To be honest, if it's not going to get there on time, don't overpromise. Like, if your pet needs food, I mean, I've got 2 cats. If I was ordering pet food and I was checking the delivery time, and then there's none left, I'm gonna be pretty pissed off. I'm gonna have to go to the shop and buy some. And I think that may sound super obvious, but most brands aren't that transparent. And also goes back to that proactive piece, that maybe your average delivery times are 2 to 3 days, but if your fulfillment team are telling you that, hey, there's a bit of delay, it's so important that your frontline agents have that level of information, so that when they do respond, they can proactively, edit macros. And obviously the website can be updated like in a click, but still, people don't read that. People are still going to purchase thinking it's still a 2 to 3 day turnaround time. So just giving your frontline agents that. And same applies whether you're outsourcing or offering that in-house. There are important business updates from the Bottle Club. I can't say how important it is for Tim's team to tell our team, because otherwise, we're still going to be working the same way, when actually that may contradict the processes that have changed internally. But yeah, so that was a long answer. Just be honest, basically, especially if it's like to keep your pet alive, I think.
While we was recording this, I've just seen a delivery of pet food. I'm not joking. I think there's about 5 boxes outside my door, and I've only got a tiny cockapoo. So I don't know
Really?
what's gone on there with the ordering, but we've got probably enough to last us until next summer. And then I suppose I think we've only really got time for like one more. You've talked about like surprise and delight quite a bit for like VIP customers and things. What do you think is like an easy way of being able to do that without it being too costly? And I suppose like cost can be around like time as well, like too timely for your team to implement.
So at least from what I've seen across loads of different brands, if you want to do it specific ways, some brands we work with don't want to do it from a cost point of view, because surprise and delight can add a bit of cost. I think you just have to give autonomy and freedom to the frontline agents. Like, you can have a process in place, but sometimes you just need to go off script. And there's a really cool example, a fashion brand shared with us, not that we'd actually taken credit for this, but they tried this before, is they had like a pop-up shop down, and I think I explained this one at DTC Live, like down at Gunwharf Quay. Somewhat like a super fan had gone down to like check it out. There was nothing left. They then emailed me like, I'm gutted. I went all the way down to Portsmouth. There was nothing. They knew they were doing a pop-up in whatever the other one is in Oxford. So they just gave them like a £200 voucher, paid for their train line ticket, said, hey, look, go have a nice weekend. Obviously the lifetime value of that customer would have been very high to be able to quantify that. And I think sometimes you can have a process in place, i.e. if lifetime value is worth X, you may give them the following. I think sometimes you just need to put like the onus on the agents to have that freedom to be able to offer that type of next level experience we're required. So I don't actually think it's something you can script that much, to be honest.
Have you done anything, Tim, that you?
No, we are a very low margin run business, so surprise and delight is not something we very, very often do. But I think
giving away like £200 bottles of champagne for every order, but you were like, nah, can't do that.
It'd be nice, but it's not the vibe. But I think for me, it's not surprise and delight. But again, what nurtures those customers is just being proactive and being honest. And I think when I've messaged customers directly and they're fuming about something, because if it gets escalated past customer service into me, and I will go in and I'll speak to the customer directly and say, this is what's happened, this is why, and see what we can offer. But I just think that having the opportunity to communicate directly with somebody that knows the correct answer and being really honest about it and being proactive with the problem is what matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys. Just before we finish, everyone's probably wondering what Stock Monitor is, Tim. Can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. So this is I'm a co-founder of a business called Monitor Apps. It's a new app that we've just launched called Stock Monitor. We have a lot of out of stock products within our large portfolio. So one conversation that we've had countless times is, I don't know if I was in stock on that day of that product. It's massive for paid media, just understanding how your Google shopping campaigns are performing and just having a better visibility of out of stock products historically and working out your inventory value and things. So because that information isn't available to anyone with Shopify, we decided that we should build it. It was built for me. And then we decided that we could open this up for all merchants. So just launched last week, but I'm really passionate about what the insights it's going to bring to brands and especially buying teams and merchandising teams about sell-through rate, out of stocks and historic performance.
Amazing, super exciting. Well, thank you both so much. I think that was a really great conversation, and I'm sure everybody's managed to get some top tips from that as well. So thank you everyone for listening as well. And if they do want to find out a bit more about One Pilot, George, what's the best way of reaching out?
Just onepilot.co, or just connect me on LinkedIn, either or.
Cool.
7,500 products worth of alcohol on bottleclub.com. And then obviously if you have any questions on Stock Monitor, just drop us a line on LinkedIn. I'm happy to do any demos or walk you through it.